Got some defensive coordinator updates, and I'm going to give you my end of the year awards. What is up, fans? Yes, I got two updates for you about the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator search. And then the team gave out their awards. I think that happened like a few days ago, maybe about a week ago. And I thought, I'm going to give you guys my awards for the year on the Miami Dolphins, being that none of the Dolphins are probably going to get any awards when the end of the year comes, that award ceremony for MVP, offensive MVP, defensive, all this stuff. But I got mine for the team for 2022. So without further ado, let me give you some updates on the defensive coordinator search, and then we'll get into the team awards. So first and foremost, on the defensive coordinator search, Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio is being associated with the Miami Dolphins a lot, right? I'm just going to pop up a few things. Boom. I'm told Vic Fangio is a target expected to receive strong consideration for the Dolphins defensive coordinator vacancy. Per league source, it remains to be seen what Fangio's response is. And I'm hearing that Mike McDaniel really liked Vic Fangio and was, had that connection with Vic Fangio before the decision on keeping Josh Boyer was a thing or not. So again, there's that. Then you have this one. Bam. Vic Fangio is a name you'll hear a lot in the coming weeks for DC positions. I'd expect Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins to make an aggressive play, as would the Eagles if they lose Gannon. And Gannon is the Eagles defensive coordinator who has potential to become a head coach, just especially because the way the Eagles defense is playing, top 10 defense. And then you also have this one. Eagles are expected to make an aggressive play for longtime NFL defensive mastermind Vic Fangio in case they lose DC defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon to a head coach position. Gannon is a strong candidate for the Texans per Albert Breer. The Dolphins are also in on Fangio. So obviously, he's on top of my list. He's probably on top of a bunch of your list. Vic Fangio is a very, very good defensive coordinator. Go back and watch my video I put out the day that Josh Boyer got fired. And I gave you all of his accolades and everything as a defensive coordinator, especially with the 49ers, where he consistently was pushing out top 10 defenses, right? Sean Payton is a guy. So the thing we need to be looking at when it comes to, can the Dolphins get Vic Fangio, right? First and foremost, Sean Payton. Sean Payton's having his second interview with the Denver Broncos, and a lot of rumors out there is that Sean Payton put together the master class of coordinators that when he goes in for these job interviews, he's going to be like, this is who I can bring with me, because he has the pull and he can bring these players, these coordinators. Supposedly Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator he bring in. But he's having his second interview with Denver. And for a fact Vic Fangio is not going to be head coach in Denver a year ago and then go back as their defensive coordinator. That ain't happening. So if Sean Payton gets the head coaching job at the Denver Broncos, then that really brings it down to who's going to fight for Vic Fangio besides the Miami Dolphins. And that comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. So if they do lose their defensive coordinator again and to the Texans, then that would suck because he's kind of already in-house, and the Dolphins would have to push hard for them to keep or push hard for them to try to pull again Fangio away from the Philadelphia Eagles. So again, it's I'll keep you updated, and I'll keep what happens with Denver, what happens the whole Gannon situation with Philly will either happen after this weekend if they lose or after the Super Bowl, regardless. So that's why the Dolphins are kind of in like a hold position, if you notice. And they have requested for one interview for their defensive coordinator position. I'm going to talk about that in 2 seconds. Well, other than that, they've been real quiet, and they've been in a hold position because they're waiting. Fangio, what are you thinking? Are you going with Sean Payton to whatever team he gets if it's not Denver? Or you can stay with Philly if they lose Gannon? I really think that Fangio is number one on the Dolphins list, and I think that's why you're not hearing much. And you're hearing a hush-hush because they probably have been talking to Fangio because of the fact that he's not a coordinator and he's just a consultant for the Eagles. They don't need to make it known, and they don't need to say, we're requesting. He's not a coordinator. So the Dolphins probably are in contact with Vic Fangio. Like, we want you here. we got a good defense. We got the players. We just need you to help us with the scheme. And I'll talk about that scheme in a second. So keep an eye on that. The other thing, let me pop this up. Skaplow. The Vikings and the Dolphins, both of whom have vacant DC jobs, have requested to interview Seahawks defensive assistant and associated head coach Sean Desai, sources say. Now, at first I was like, who the flip is Sean Desai? I don't know who the heck this guy is, and I don't want another guy who's never had a defensive coordinator, experience coming in here, right? We did that with Boyer. We did that with a few guys. And I'm just like, I would really, our offense is so up there. I would like the defense to match. And I don't know if I want a first-time guy. So I looked up who Sean Desai is. And maybe I'm being a butt. That's not the word I want to use, but I can't use my brain right now. He's a Vic Fangio disciple. He was, when Vic Fangio left the Chicago Bears to go be the head coach of the Denver Broncos, Desai took over the defensive coordinator position for Chicago, and he led that Chicago Bear defense to the 6th defense in the NFL, despite not having Khalil Mack, despite not having Trevathan, and despite not having Akeem Hicks. He had that defense of Chicago number 6 in the NFL. He puts a big emphasis on sacks and turnovers, just like Vic Fangio. And he introduced the takeaway bucket in training camp, where if you get a turnover, whether interception, scoop, fumble, whatever, you dunk that sucker. Little incentive, kind of like the turnover chain. Little incentive there. He does have a acknowledgement, just like Vic Fangio, with the 3-4 defense. So the Dolphins wouldn't have to change up too much. But if he thought maybe, and again, this is why I want someone experienced, and the more I'm doing research, it seems like Sean Desai has experience, to look at who we have, the players we have, and have them decide these guys actually would be better in a 4-3, or actually, this 3-4 is working well, but the scheme that Boyer had going just didn't really work. Because I've talked about this before, McDaniel, his thought process is we need a pass rush. Boyer was the complete opposite. He was more worried about the secondary, and you saw that, especially because our pass rush disappeared when Boyer took over. Both know how to disguise coverages without making the defense complicated, in that Sean Desai and Vic Fangio know how to do that. So now I'm sitting back, right? And now I'm putting the puzzle pieces together. To me, and from what I'm hearing, Vic Fangio is number 1 on the Miami Dolphins list for defensive coordinator. But if they can't get Vic Fangio, they've already put in a request to interview Sean Desai. And who is Sean Desai? He's his disciple. He's who he learned from. He's the next possible Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio's 64, Sean Desai's 39. And now I'm putting the puzzle pieces together. And again, this is my opinion. You can take it or leave it. I think if they can't get Fangio, they're going to get Sean Desai, because it's just a younger Vic Fangio. He doesn't have the resume that Fangio has, but he learned from Vic Fangio, who is a very good cover 2 style defense, which really stops what the NFL is doing right now. Vic Fangio's was what I'm trying to say. So I found that very, very interesting. So that's your little update there on the defensive coordinator search. Fangio seems to be number 1, and they have already put in an interview for Sean Desai, and I give you a little background there. I'll keep you updated. Any more news comes out, any more interviews come out, I'll make a video specifically for that to give you guys those updates. Now let's jump into team awards, and I'll give you my end of the year team awards. So first off, the Miami Dolphins, what did they give? So Tyreek Hill won Dan Marino's MVP. Tua Tagovailoa won Don Shula's Leadership Award. Alec Ingold won Ed Block's Courage Award. And Emmanuel Ogbah won Nate Moore's Community Service Award, which all of those duly noted. Here's my awards. Now, for MVP of the team, I'm going to agree with the Miami Dolphins, and I'm going with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill when he's on the man has so much fight. He was the offense. He had, he was encouraging the things he was saying in the offseason and just constantly having his guys back and never fighting. Plus, listen to these stats, right? He'll shatter the Dolphins single season receptions, 119, and receiving yard record, 1,710. Obviously, MVP. And his 1,710 receiving yards are the most by any player in NFL history in his first season with the team. Oh, he's going to have a big regression playing with Tua. No, obviously he didn't. Hill had 7 100-yard games this season, the second most in a season in team history, and led the league with 4 receptions of 50 yards plus. He also led the league in fourth quarter receiving yards with 478. Hill finished with at least 10 receptions and 150 receiving yards in 4 different games, tied for the most such games in a single season in NFL history. Again, a lot of people thought he was going to have a dip in production playing with Hill because a lot of people thought Tua sucked. Nope. So obviously, Tyreek Hill is the Miami Dolphins MVP. Offensive MVP. I'm going with Teron Armstead. Now, Teron Armstead didn't play as much as I would like him to. His injury list just kept getting bigger and bigger from his toe, from his pec, from his knee, It was easier to list what wasn't injured on him. But when Teron Armstead was on the field, that offensive line played lights out. They were running the ball like crazy. Tua felt comfortable. He was productive. So you cannot look at the whole offense and not think of Teron Armstead as the offensive MVP. Flip it. Defensive MVP of the Miami Dolphins. Christian Wilkins. Like, that man, since 1994, no defensive lineman has had more tackles than him, 96 on the season. Christian Wilkins deserves a contract extension. Christian Wilkins is the heart and soul of that defensive line, possibly of that defense, right? A close number 2 for defensive MVP, I would say, was Jalen Phillips, but Christian Wilkins is the defensive MVP. Now I'm getting into some fun categories, if you want to say. Most disappointing is Xavier Howard. Now, banged up, he was the lone, experienced corner, but again, Kader Kohou had a way better season than he did. He was disappointing. I wish we had the X of the 10 interception year. Is that because of the defensive scheme? Is that because of the position he was put in? Is that because Byron wasn't there? Is that because Brandon Jones wasn't there? Is that because of a lot of variables? Possibly, but you cannot look at his season this year and not think, what a huge regression. Compared to anyone else on this team, huge regression from Xavier Howard. So most disappointing for me is Xavier Howard. Most improved. So most improved, what I did with most improved is I looked at a bunch of guys that I had considerations for most improved. And I looked at their stats from last year to this year to see who, in my eyes, is the most improved from last year to this year. And I have my guy. And to me, it's a no-brainer who's the most improved. And this might rub some people the wrong way, but if it rubs you the wrong way, so be it. Most improved 2022 for the Miami Dolphins is Tua Tagovailoa. You can't look at his stats. You can't look at his play. You can't look at the 5-game winning streak, the Ravens game, both Bills games. You can't look at those games and not think he has a big improvement from last year. Last year, how many times were we like, he's not putting the team on his back and winning. He's just relying on the defense, and he's not doing this. And he's had 1 or 2 good games this year. That's it. This year, he put the team on his back and beat the Baltimore Ravens. He helped beat the Buffalo Bills with that 3rd and 22 pass. He had that 3-game streak where he was just elite, and I don't want to hear anything about, we were bad teams, because I'll give you stats of quarterbacks that are better than him that didn't do as good. He helped this team win, and then when he wasn't on the field, you saw the drop in production. So to me, he was the most improved, was Tua Tagovailoa. The most overrated, I'm pretty sure we can all agree on this, it's Bradley Chubb. Now, Bradley Chubb, mid-season, he came to the Miami Dolphins, had to get acclimated to a new team, had to get acclimated to possibly a new system. where he's going to be playing, all that stuff. I'm not saying he's a bust. I'm not saying the trade was a bust. I want to see what he can do this upcoming year. Full training camp. Hopefully, this new DC knows how to use him properly, all that stuff. But from what we saw, the contract he got and what we were expecting, utter disappointment and completely overrated. So Bradley Chubb, most overrated. Most underrated, again, I'm pretty sure we can all agree on this one, Kader Kohou. Undrafted free agent, kind of like Nick Needham, but he had a better season than Nick Needham's rookie year. He got thrusted into the number 2 cornerback position and outshined Xavier Howard. Was targeted more, allowed less yards, allowed less receptions, and allowed a less passer rating and less touchdowns. And again, targeted more. Quarterbacks were like, I'm going to target Kader because there's Xavier Howard. Less yards, less receptions, less touchdowns, and a lesser passer rating. So Kader Kohou is my most underrated. And then the final award that I came up with, I probably could have came up with like a laundry list of awards for this team. But the last one I came up with is which player has the most potential. And for me, the player on this team, and again, I could raffle off a list of players that have the most potential, but for me, it's Jalen Phillips. The amount of his ranking of pressure, his ranking of knockdowns, his ranking of win percentage, his ranking of everything, right? He had 8.5 sacks last year. He had 7 sacks this year. I just see him getting better and better. And I think he has an absolute ton of potential, right? And a lot of people look at that and say, oh, 8.5 sacks and 7 sacks. We need more than that. We're looking at guys with 10 sacks. We're looking at guys with this. And my thing to you is look up Jason Taylor. 97, 98, 99, his first 3 years. His first year, he had 5 sacks. His second year went up to 9 sacks. His third year went down to 2.5 sacks. And then blossomed, 14 sacks, then down to 8.5, 18.5, 13. All right, to me, Jalen Phillips on this team has the most potential, especially if they can put him in a good situation where they stop dropping him back into coverage. If they just have this kid constantly get after the quarterback and constantly rush, I think he can have double-digit sacks every year. He had 8.5 and 7, and that's with him dropping back into coverage. I honestly think if he didn't drop back into coverage as much as he did, he'd probably have 10 sacks these past 2 years. So to me, Jalen Phillips, most potential. But that's my awards for the end of the year. If you have any category that I didn't come up with, comment it below and tell me who you pick. And then I'll see it and then I'll give you my pick if I agree or disagree. But yeah, I thought this would be fun to do end of the year, give awards. I think I'm going to start doing this every year. But that's what I got for you today. I got a ton of videos planned for you guys. A lot of you guys were like, hey, Doug, like after the cat video, you're like, hey, Doug, who would you want in free agency? Who would you cut? Who would you resign? Who this, who that? Blah, 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 blah. Those are all videos. I have videos about who we should cut. I have videos about who we should resign. I have videos of who the Dolphins should target in free agency. I have videos of the Dolphins' biggest needs. This is all before free agency on March 15th. I also have videos for the draft because we have 1, 2, 2 3s, a 6 and a 7. Possibly a 4 and a 5 if we trade Cedric Wilson. Talked about that in yesterday's video. But be sure to comment below. Let me know what you guys think. We just broke 39,100. Getting closer and closer to 40K. Once you break 40K, big giveaway. But on that, I'll see you guys tomorrow. But like usual, stay classy and fins out.